Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlene Demiani, an assistant chaplain here at St. Thomas More, and I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming you to Jerusalem. One city, three faith perspectives, a groundbreaking collaboration between St. Thomas More, the Catholic Chapel and Center at Yale, the Joseph Slifka Center for Jewish Life at Yale, the Muslim Student Association at Yale, and the Interfaith Club at Yale Divinity School. None of us need to be reminded of the increased violence and tension between religious communities, tension that directly impacted the New Haven community this past May, when the Dinette Mosque was intentionally burned to the ground. In these moments of hatred and despair, we find ourselves asking the question, what can we do? This event is a direct response to that question. When Rabbi Jason Rubenstein, Howard M. Holtzman Jewish chaplain at Yale, Omer Bajwa, director of Muslim life at Yale, and I met over the summer, we spoke of our desire to bring our vibrant religious communities together over a topic of shared interest, to model the beauty of civil discourse and discussion. After consulting our students, we focused our theme on Jerusalem, a city whose name means city of peace, a city that embodies the shared and somewhat contentious sacred space between the three great monotheistic religions. Rabbi Jason, Omer, and I each invited a panelist to speak on the importance of Jerusalem in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We sought panelists whose lives embody a commitment to learning and interfaith dialogue. It is my delight to introduce you briefly to our three panelists. Their impressive backgrounds are more fully described in your programs. Rabbi Dr. Aaron Leib Smokler is the Director of Spiritual Development at Yeshivat Maharat, a rabbinical school for Orthodox women in New York. She teaches Hasidism and pastoral theology. Professor Carol Bakos is professor of late antique Judaism and Jewish studies in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures at UCLA and currently serves as the director of the Center for the Study of Religion. On a personal note, I had the great privilege of studying religion with Professor Bakos while a student at UCLA, and I can say confidently I would not be standing here had it not been for her teaching and mentorship. Imam Abdullah Antepli is an associate professor of the practice at Duke University's Sanford School of Public Policy, as well as an associate professor of the practice of interfaith relations at Duke Divinity School. We will begin our evening with opening remarks from each panelist, followed by a moderated discussion led by A.R. Malik from the Psy Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. In your programs, you will find an index card on the back. Please write down any question that comes to mind, and we will collect them after our panelists have made their opening comments. The night will conclude with a kosher dinner in the dining hall, offering continued opportunity for dialogue over a shared meal. And finally, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize our sponsoring foundation. This event would not be possible without the most generous support of the Elizabeth and Joseph Massoud Family Foundation. Thank you to the Massoud family for your investment in interfaith dialogue, religious collaboration, and our community's response to the question, what can we do? We can do this. And now, without further ado, I welcome Rabbi Aaron to begin our discussion.
Better? Okay, great. So hi, everybody. It's truly an honor to be here. It's been an overwhelming experience for me to have a chance to explore your community just a little bit this afternoon and to reacquaint myself with a place that has meaning in my family. So thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and to be part of this provocative but also really moving and meaningful conversation, I hope. So I'd like to begin by sharing a bit about myself and what brings me here to talk about this particular topic. I am a scholar of Jewish text, living deep inside of Jewish lore and longings, dreams about God, Zion, and so much more. And I'm also a longtime lover of Jerusalem, its history, its labyrinthine streets, its uniquely gorgeous light, its varied people, and the spirit that seems to saturate it and energize it. I visited first when I was around 10 years old, then spent time there in my teens, studied for a year there in seminary after high school, before college, and now I travel there every summer with my family for several weeks. I've also spent a good deal of time with the wildly diverse populations of Jerusalem, both East and West Jerusalem, Jewish, Muslim, and Christians, listening in on the stories that draw so many people to it. I do that with the help of an organization called Encounter, and with the help of the Muslim Leadership Initiative of the Shalom Hartman Institute, that maybe we'll hear more about, I don't know. Jerusalem is, in many ways, my second home, full of friends and food and fun, and also very full of holiness and full of memories. It's a place that echoes through time, through my lifetime, and through the lifetime of my ancestors. A place that makes me feel, in the inimitable words of the El Al advertisement, Hachi babayit ba'olam, most at home in the world. And yet, like many homes, even loving ones, it is also a place that troubles and unsettles me. Jerusalem makes me feel both deeply embraced and deeply alienated, proud and sometimes ashamed, connected and disconnected, alive and excited, and numb and scared. It is a place where my identities as a woman, as an Orthodox Jew, and as a rabbi are both nourished and heavily scrutinized. Aspects of self that anchor me here often destabilize me there. It's a complicated, paradoxical, magical, mythical, completely maddening place. A place identified by the Jewish tradition as the center of a land that flows with milk and honey, under God's protective eyes always, and a land that eats its inhabitants and vomits out sinners. That is Jerusalem. It feeds your soul like nothing else can, and it can feed on you too, like nothing else should. It locates you and dislocates you. I want to share a story. Just yesterday, Jews celebrated a holiday called Simchat Torah, a celebration at the tail end of another holiday, the Sukkot holiday, of the end of one cycle of Torah reading and the beginning of another. It's marked by joyous singing and circle dancing with and around Torah scrolls. At my synagogue, just as the energy lifted in the room, a song broke out and was chanted with great gusto. The words were from Isaiah 2:3. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah udvar Hashem miyerushalayim. For the Torah, or the Lord's teaching, will go out from Zion, and God's word will go out from Jerusalem. And I thought, how intriguing is this moment, and how pregnant with meaning. Here we dance in America, dreaming of Jerusalem, as have our ancestors for generations, reveling in our tradition, but locating its center elsewhere. This, of course, means different things to different people, both what we mean by center, what we mean by Torah, and what we even mean by Jerusalem. But the image itself stuck with me as I thought about tonight's conversation, because it speaks to the centrality of Jerusalem in the millennium-old liturgy and rituals of Judaism, and of the duality of consciousness in the hearts of many Jews. Many of us spiritually inhabit more than one home. This dual consciousness, I would argue, actually reflects a duality at the heart of Jerusalem itself. Indeed, the Jewish tradition imagines Jerusalem, in the words of the great Hebrew poet Yehuda Amichai, quote, always in twos. The Hebrew name itself for Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, is plural, like the Hebrew words yadayim, hands, or raglayim, legs. It's the combination, according to the Midrash, that's in your little packets over there. It's a combination, according to the Midrash, an ancient collection of commentaries, of two names. Adonai Yireh, God will see, or just Yireh, given to it by Abraham, and Shalem, meaning wholeness, given to it by Shem, who is the son of Noah. Genesis Rabbah 56:10 suggests that in an attempt to not offend either party, God combined these two terms, Yireh and Shalem, to create the name Yerushalayim. The Midrash says, Hareini kore oto Yerushalayim, kemo shekaru shnehem, Yireh Shalem Yerushalayim. God said, I call it Yerushalayim, as they called it, Yireh Shalem, Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was established in this imagining by two righteous individuals with two founding stories, perhaps two sets of dreams, two time horizons, God will see in the future versus Shalem, all is already complete, and arguably two grounding faiths, with Abraham being a Jew and Shem not. From the moment of its inception, it was a layered, complex, contested place, rich with multiple meanings and rooted in pieties. Through that plurality of ideology and identity, though, note that God sought unity and harmony. In an effort to protect the feelings of human beings, God formalized the holy city's duality, binding polarities and endowing it with a legacy of two-ness in perpetuity. So that's Jerusalem, a place of intense paradox, teeming with life, with so many people's stories, histories, devotions, love affairs, a place where God sees you and you see God, Adonai Yireh, and a place that fills one with a sense of shleimut, or holiness, or wholeness rather. One other story. It's 2 a.m. and my family has recently arrived in Jerusalem. We are jet-lagged and we are wired. Unlike New York City, where we live, the city that never sleeps, Jerusalem is sleeping. So what to do with 3 kids all wide awake and ready for action? Head to the Kotel, to the Wailing Wall, that small reminder, or remainder rather, of the ancient Jewish temple of Jerusalem. It's always open, and surely we can ride out some of our sleeplessness there. And so we arrive, and it is bustling. Spiritual seekers and beggars clamor for space. Teenagers lounge about. An ultra-Orthodox women's group has arrived to have a learning session in the women's section. Psalms are being recited in the men's section. There is an electricity found there in this site of pilgrimage, in this site of deep Jewish memory, host to so many prayers, so many yearnings, and so many tears. And there is also pain here. Pain in the ways that this site excludes and hurts. It is a contested space, host to so much conflict, so much violence, between ultra-Orthodox Jews and other Jews, between men and women, between Jews and Muslims. It sits beside the Dome of the Rock, holy, of course, to our Muslim brethren. And that juxtaposition, both symbolically and actually, surfaces the tension between peoples. Just how many stories can one sacred space hold? The Midrash says, many. The enduring duality at the heart of Jerusalem is also reflected in another important dimension, the dual consciousness that it invites. The Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Ta'anit 5a, speaks of 2 Jerusalems, Yerushalayim Shel Mala, literally a Jerusalem above, and Yerushalayim Shel Mata, a Jerusalem below. Says the Talmud, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo avo b'Yerushalayim Shel Mala ad she'avo l'Yerushalayim Shel Mata. God says, I shall not enter Jerusalem above until I enter Jerusalem below. The interpreters in this particular context understood this to mean that God will not fully inhabit some heavenly Jerusalem until the earthly one becomes fully sacred, a rather mysterious notion and one that has captured the imagination of Jews for generations. For some, the Jerusalem above was imagined to be a template for the Jerusalem below, a Platonic form of sorts, one that even predated creation. For others, it's a mystical space, a place unto itself, independent of the gritty mundaneness of lived reality, a place of pristine holiness and proximity to the divine that exists concurrently with its more shabby sister city, the Jerusalem of below. For others still, celestial Jerusalem is the redeemed, messianic vision of what terrestrial Jerusalem will one day be. Whatever one's local interpretation, the concept of a Yerushalayim Shel Mala and a Yerushalayim Shel Mata in Upper and Lower Jerusalem has given Jews language for centuries to dream of an elevated, worldly and otherworldly city, a godly and human city, a city spiritually rich in ways that no other place could be, in the here and now and or just over the horizon. It has fed romantic visions and heightened expectations, and it has also fed delusions. This too is Jerusalem, a place and not a place at all, an ideal and a reality, a lofty abstraction and a material, mundane experience, a wonder and a disappointment. Some of us live more in one place than the other. One last anecdote, and then I will close. I am sitting late one night at a concert in Jerusalem. I'm at the Shalom Hartman Institute, a place that I teach at, and Abdullah also does. It's a think tank for Jewish leaders as well as Christian and Muslim leaders. On this night, 250 rabbis from across the world have convened to study together, to share wisdom, to relax, to rejuvenate, and the singer for the evening is a young secular Israeli artist named Netanel Goldberg. His voice is the sweetest voice that I've ever heard, and he sings songs both old and new, playing with words from the Jewish tradition, praying with his guitar, it seems. He begins a song whose words are familiar to me, but whose source I cannot quite place. And then I realize that he has put to music some words from a beloved rabbi to me, Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, a Polish Hasidic leader of the Holocaust era who perished there. I wrote my dissertation years ago about his teachings, written and buried inside of the Warsaw Ghetto. I spent years poring over his writings, but I had never heard his voice. When Netanel began to sing, though, I heard the voice of that Rebbe, and I began to cry. He came alive, as did his generation and so many generations that have come before. And I thought, only in Jerusalem. Only here can 21st century rabbis come together to open their hearts to their Polish ancestors, to feel connected to history, tradition, community, to be taught by a secular Jew the power of religious striving. Only under these perfect skies and under this sweet air can the soul be stirred to such height. Only here can time and space collapse so gracefully into an intense, overwhelming present. I left that concert sure that I had heard an angel sing, sure that I had experienced Yerushalayim Shel Mala in all of its glory. God was present, eternity seemed near. But then there was Yerushalayim Shel Mata, waiting for me just outside the gates. The noise of the taxi cabs, the garbage that had yet to be picked up, the crazy politics in the news, the threats of conflict, etc., etc., etc. The real world and all of its imperfections and intractable challenges could not be sung away. It weighs and it calls and it demands sober responsibility. Regarding this duality of Jerusalem, our Talmudic text from Ta'anit cites Psalm's redemptive hope. Yerushalayim habnuya ki ir shechubra la yachtav. Jerusalem built up, that is Jerusalem of the future or Jerusalem the redeemed, a city unified or literally knitted together. Jerusalem is a patchwork of so many people's dreams stitched together. It's a city and it's an idea of truth, justice, love, harmony, piety. The psalmist, as interpreted by the rabbis of the Talmud, imagines a time when ideas about Jerusalem will be truly expressed in Jerusalem, when Yerushalayim Shel Mala will be Yerushalayim Shel Mata. Until then, we live with a dual consciousness in conversation with a city of so many twos. I'd like to conclude with the words of the poet Yehud Amichai that I referenced in the opening. Lama Yerushalayim tamid shtayim, shel mala v'shel mata. V'ani rotzeh lichyot b'Yerushalayim shel emtza, bli lachbot et roshi lemala, ubli liftzo et raglai lemata.
ולמה ירושלים בלשון זוגית, כמו ידיים ורגליים? אני רוצה להיות רק בירושל אחת, כי אני רק אני אחד ולא שניים. Why is Jerusalem always in twos, one of above and the other of below? I want to live in a Jerusalem of the middle, without turning my head above and without wounding my legs below. And why is Jerusalem in the language of pairs, like hands and legs? I only want to be in one Jerusalem, Yerushal, he says, because I am only one, there are no more. To live with Jerusalem as a Jew, to love Jerusalem as a Jew, is to live with the consciousness of energizing, enervating dualities, and to yearn for unity. Thank you.
Great. Hi, can you hear me? Great, wonderful. Well, first I'd like to begin by thanking the event organizers, Rabbi Jason and Imam Omar Bajwa and Carlene Demiani, assistant chaplain here at St. Thomas More, and of course the Elizabeth and Joseph Masood Family Foundation for their generous support. I'm especially grateful to Carlene for making this possible from start to finish. I believe this was her brainchild. And, you know, on a personal note, indeed, as you can well imagine, having had, oh, hi there, Christina, Carlene's sister, who also went to UCLA, having had Carlene as a student 17 years ago, makes this all the more meaningful to watch one of our brightest students flourish here with you at Yale is, it gives me great nachas and tremendous satisfaction. And for those of you who don't know Carlene, you should know that she is an extraordinarily remarkable young woman. She is an intelligent individual, a person of tremendous depth of character, and indeed a blessing to me and to those who know her. So let me just tell you just very briefly a little about my experience with Jerusalem. The first time I went to Jerusalem was soon after completing a master's degree in theological studies. I went on a dig, the Harvard dig to Ashkelon. We have an archaeologist here with us from Israel, Professor Adler, who also likes digging. He prefers digging up dirt on people, but anyway. So I finished my master's, and I was getting ready to go to JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary, to do my doctoral work in Jewish studies. So I went on this dig, 1992, and while I was there, I went to Jerusalem for the first time. And I didn't see lived Jerusalem. I was just overwhelmed by the mythical dimensions of being there. The fact that this was the place where Jesus taught and lived. This place, the Axis Mundi, the place where the temple, the Ir David, the city of David. This is Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, the city of gold. This is where it all happened, right? It was just such an overwhelming experience. I was blown away by the feeling of being part of history. It was that feeling that overwhelmed me. But there was also another feeling, and that was discovering my mother tongue, Arabic, right? So I went to Israel on the dig and to Jerusalem to study Hebrew, to train for my doctoral work. And while I was there, what I discovered was the language of my parents. My mother was from Aleppo, Syria, Halab, and my father came from northern Lebanon, from a small Christian village, Turza, and the language I spoke at home for most of my life until I left for college was Arabic, was my first language. And then I went to college, and who wants to speak Arabic? I mean, that right? I mean, I'm gonna talk New York. Anyway, I get there, and what I discover is that Jerusalem is not just the city of Hebrew and Jews. I discovered Arabic. I connected with Palestinians. I connected with Arabs. I connected with Muslims. I connected with Christians. In Jerusalem, I felt completely myself as a Middle Easterner, as an Arab, as a Catholic, as a woman enamored of the Jewish tradition. It was totalizing. And the year after, I continued to go. I went to Ulpan to study more Hebrew, and I, began to see the less mythic, more messier Jerusalem, the one that you, Rabbi Aaron, beautifully described, the bifurcated or multifaceted Jerusalem. And so I saw I came to experience the lived Jerusalem. And that was also enriching and okay by me. Jerusalem is a place I continue to go to. It's a place that continues to come to me. As you said, it's a second home. I completely feel at home in Jerusalem. So it is. So speaking about Jerusalem now in this academic sort of way, which I'm going to get to in a moment, is a little odd, because that's not Jerusalem to me. Jerusalem is that lived, beautiful place with a lot of friends and meaning for me. So, but we can talk more about our personal trajectories. And thank you for allowing me to share that background with you. I'm usually not so personal. So, very quickly, 3 points about the role of Jerusalem in Christianity. First, the historical dimension. The historical dimension is Christocentric, rooted primarily in the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And we won't go through the excerpts here, but I picked excerpts that demonstrate, that show how Jesus lived, taught, and his life becomes a very important part of why Christians believe, why Christians understand Jerusalem to be important. This is where Jesus did his thing, if you will. The second important point is
He did quite a bit.
And he did quite a bit. He really did quite a bit. He did. The second aspect is the teleological, the completing, fulfilling Scripture. Not only fulfilling Scripture, and not only fulfilling Israelite history, but fulfilling world history. If you go to the book of Revelation, right, and a lot of the images of the idea of the new and the heavenly Jerusalem, the earthly Jerusalem, we see all that played out in the New Testament. You can look at Ezekiel and New Jerusalem there, and how that plays out in Revelation, and the idea of the second coming of the Messiah, the ingathering, all to take place in Jerusalem. And then you'll see later on Jerusalem, right, so Jerusalem has that sense of bringing things to an end, the completion and fulfillment of scriptures, and that's why Jerusalem is important. And it's really an idea that unfortunately we don't have time to unpack, but that's an important point for understanding why Jerusalem is important for Christians. And thirdly, finally, Jerusalem's role, something to really keep in mind, and I suspect it plays out in all three traditions, is there's the historicized and the spiritualized or meta-historical aspect, the mythic aspect, right? And the way it's not an either or, it's the way they operate concomitantly that's important to understand. And we see that with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Golgotha, the place where Jesus was crucified, comes to be the place where Adam was buried, comes to be the place where Isaac was nearly sacrificed. So this one place that is connected to history, this is where supposedly Jesus was crucified, comes to also have these other layered meanings that are spiritualized, if you will, or as I said, take on that mythic aspect. I know we're short of time, so I'm just going to move on to Imam Abdullah.
Thank you for that Christian grace and hospitality. Thank you. Good evening and assalamu alaikum. Good to be here. I also would like to briefly add my thanks to Masood family and all the organizers, especially my dear friend and mentor Imam Omar Bajwa, who is a gift to the world. If only the world could have created, if only the God Almighty would have created more Imam Omar Bajwas, I think we would have many, many Jerusalems. Yes. I will blend personal and slightly historical and scriptural religious content very quickly so that we can actually have a conversation. As a Turkish Muslim, grew up in the very secular environment, not religious, but became religious in his teenage years. Jerusalem and its place is very reflective of the Muslim imagination. To say overall theological religious imagination in the Muslim imagination, Jerusalem occupies an incredibly important place, both figuratively as well as literally in many sense, would be a gross understatement. It plays a very important role. Much of the Muslim history, especially in the initial stages, the mental picture of Muhammad, peace be upon him, mental picture of the Prophet of Islam was always not a warrior, not a sort of a guru. His picture in the Muslim imagination on Muslim screen, he always showed up as someone, he just went up to see God, who saw the beauty of God, who reunited with Almighty, and if we become like Muhammad, he can take us into the same journey. If we become Muhammadi, if we can become Muhammad-like, we can make that journey that he did spiritually, miraculously, literally, however you understand, in his 9th year of prophetic career from Mecca to Jerusalem and from Jerusalem to heaven. That journey is possible to anyone who deserve to be that part of spiritual journey. And pretty much in my own personal life, as I became religious and converted to Sunni Islam, and with that conversion zeal, Jerusalem's place was incredibly important and central for my life. My first visit, I will never forget, I was 19. After being interrogated at Tel Aviv Ben Gurion Airport for 11 hours. And unfortunately, that's it. Unfortunately and regretfully, somewhat a common practice for sometimes understandable, sometimes it's quite difficult to understandable reason. I was 19 with all the conversion zeal. I am going to the place where my prophet went to see God, that I will be in that location and space, which has been a spiritual telescope to all Muslims for 1400 years. It's a spiritual telescope where you put your eyes to see the heavens and try to make sense of the heavens. But none of that, what I have experienced in the airport, didn't faze me. It was almost irrelevant to me. I was holding that spiritual artificial glasses. I was hungry, tired. I'm sure I smelled terrible. back then. I rushed to Aqsa, and I remember just basically having a spiritual breakdown, weeping, crying, and praying in that place, which has no place, including, quite honestly, I'm speaking personally, Mecca or Medina, never buzzed me, electrified me in the way in which Jerusalem has ever done at the age of 19. And since then, I have been there many, many times. I think now more than 60 times. For the last 6 years, I spent at least a month and a half every year in Jerusalem as part of my work at Shalom Hartman Institute. And in 2019 alone, I've been 9 times. So I doubled that amount of time. I put a lot of people in incredible envy that I am at Jerusalem. It's the city that I know the best, like the back of my hand. And I can take you an incredible tour if you need to. That's the place where I feel most closest to God. And that's the place that alienates me the most from God. That's the place of contradictions in so many ways, where I feel so hopeful about humanity if we can do what we are trying to achieve here. If we can figure this out, if we become worthy of Jerusalem, if we can be deserving of Jerusalem, as the children of Jerusalem, as the children of people who grew out of the stories that has been created and done in the Jerusalem, or if we don't, Jerusalem, as it has done in the past, can eat us and spit us and vomit us out. Just to bring a little bit of lightheartedness and humor into the conversation, that's the place. My prayer life, I pray 5 times a day and more as a practicing Muslim, but the kind of flavor, spiritual joy that envelopes me whenever I pray in Jerusalem is incredibly intense, and so much so that I sometimes question my prayers elsewhere, why it's not that beautiful. But in one of those moments, one of my funniest anecdote is, I am from Duke University. As you can tell, I wear my religion on my sleeves. And the mascot of the Duke University is Blue Devil, the Blue Devil. In one of those intense prayer moments, I think I was loudly praying for our basketball team. Oh Allah, give glory to the devils. Oh Allah, or something. I think it was around UNC game that I was also playing for the destruction of the rival team or something like that. I remember a Palestinian touching my shoulder and saying, "Are you okay?" Like, are you praying for the shayateen, the devils in the holiest side of Islam? It's just unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. It is a place I have invested so much and a significant part of my calling. And to be like Muhammad, to be acting or patterning like the Prophet of Islam, meant that the entire journey of Jerusalem, if you do not know that miraculous journey of Isra Miraj, I appreciate we don't have time and we are running out of time that we would like to engage with you. That journey also represents one of the foundational claim and foundational theological promise of Islam that, like Muhammad, Islam never imagined to be a unique religion. Islam never imagined to be a new club. Muhammad never thought at any part of his life that he was creating a new club and looking for new membership. His life and his journey through Jerusalem was a testimony to that foundational Muslim claim that we are a part of a family. We are part of God speaking to humanity in a monotheistic tradition through Adam, Noah, Abraham. That whole claim that we are the youngest sibling of this Abrahamic family, as dysfunctional as this family as it is, but we are still part of this story. And Jerusalem stories, which I can go through its representation and manifestation in the Quran tradition, in Hadith tradition, and how it shaped, as we Muslims understood, not only understood, but also put into implementation. If you look, when Muslims took over Jerusalem, that was the first time after the destruction of the Second Temple, Jews were allowed to come, and Muslims tried to put their family dynamics into practice by trying to create a Jerusalem, at its time, one of the most creative and inclusive way to honor Christianity, to honor Judaism, honoring the holy sites of that state. It was hierarchical, it was politically not equal and egalitarian, but at its time, Muslims had many opportunities, historically, theologically, put that attachment to Jerusalem in that inclusive and pluralistic sense, which we can tease it out. But no conversation about Jerusalem or Middle East or Holy Land will be complete unless we at least put an opening into the kind of conflict and ugliness and all sorts of ethical, moral failures on all sides have been taking place. And it has theological and historical roots as well. And maybe I will end with this one. Jerusalem represented, as I said, Islam's theological, historical, and even social, cultural, and political, as Islam became a dominant force and religion of the dominant force in the Middle East, to that familial reach out to Abrahamic roots, to Judaism and Christianity, in the hierarchical sense. But pretty much later on, the waves of crusaders also pushed Jerusalem into a very problematic center, a representation and crystallization of this foreign aggression, something that Jerusalem needs to be saved and protected from outside forces who are there to destroy us, who are there to humiliate us, who are there to destroy Islam as we know it. And some of the literature, if you read it, it's so interesting. Have you seen Ice Age? And the squirrels who's protecting the pine apple. Pretty much Jerusalem in the imagination, the collective imagination of the Muslim civilizations, as a result of that attacks from the West, became that symbol that whoever assaults to Jerusalem, whoever tries to take it over from us, is a representation of that same waves of many different waves of that foreign aggression. And I hope what I'm about to say will come out incredibly respectfully. I hope you will see my work, what I'm trying to do, in many ways trying to bring some functionality into this dysfunctional Abrahamic family. And I, over time, grew to understand and even to appreciate, to some of my fellow Muslims' dismay and anger sometimes, what the creation of the State of Israel means or meant to many of my Jewish brothers and sisters, and how it was beyond the running of the fires and the horrors of the Holocaust or European. It was much more meaningful. It was a religious fulfillment project. It was a homecoming project for them. It meant so much to their Jewish identity in such a deep level that I witnessed many times and humbled by it. But in the recent form, unfortunately, we have to interject the current reality. The creation of the State of Israel, with all due respect to its meaning, its manifestation, its position in the Jewish psyche and the Jewish collective imagination for many of them, which again, I have tremendous amount of respect and even appreciation for. But those political events in the Muslim imagination, in the Muslim mirror, in the Muslim screen, undeniably was just another latest wave of that foreign aggression. It was another foreign intrusion and insult, that death and destruction that it brings with it. That's how many of my fellow Muslims, especially myself, have experienced it in initial stages. That's where much of a lot of problem, this incredibly, one community's ultimate religious fulfillment, homecoming, aliyah, that ascension in so many ways similar to Miraj, experienced very, very differently in my community, that we need to do, undo, and we can do. The last thing I will say, I think the challenge before us is not to debate, not to figure out and agree. Challenge from the last 100 years of the political developments showed us that neither Jews nor Muslims nor Christians are even coming close to deserve Jerusalem. We have proven ourselves, if Nick takes our business of Jerusalem into his consultancy firm, I think this consultancy firm will easily say, your business is not viable, it's not sustainable. You have to just return to the basics. And I think we need to do what Musa alayhi salam did in his time, to create cosmic and metaphysical and spiritual deserts where we can spend some 40 years, I hope less, a generation of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, children of this Abrahamic family, where we can come back to Jerusalem more worthy and more deserving. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Aaron, Dr. Carol, and Imam Abdullah Antepli. By way of introduction, my name is Abdurrahman Malik. Friends call me AR. I'm a lecturer at the Yale Divinity School in Islamic Studies, and it's been amazing, kind of hearing all of you present. What I think was really unique about tonight is that, in a way, while politics and geopolitics and the headlines of the moment hang over any discussion about the Holy Land, and particularly Jerusalem, I really appreciate all of you and the way in which you've delineated a kind of a spiritual and theological path for us. And I don't think this happens very much, and I think that's what makes tonight really special. I have lots of questions, but I want to make sure that we hear from some of you tonight. So you'll notice on all of your programs there's a small note card attached. If you have something burning, something that's gripping you, that you'd like to throw into the hat, quite literally, Carlene, the amazing Carlene, and the one who's made tonight happen, will be going around, and you can drop your cards in there, and also Rabbi Jason, and we'll get some of those questions up to me. I want to start off with something that Rabbi Aaron, you spoke so eloquently about, which was passion. Mm-hmm. That this is a city of passion, a city of fervor, mm-hmm. And I want to make another. I want to make another pop culture reference. If I mean, Abdullah Antepli started this with the Ice Age, but I'm going to do something a bit closer to home. In Ridley Scott's film Kingdom of Heaven, there's a really interesting scene at the end as Balian gives up the keys to Jerusalem, so to speak, and surrenders the city to the coming of the Muslim armies from Damascus. And Balian, in the wonderful visage of Orlando Bloom, asks the character of Salahuddin, what does Jerusalem mean to you? There's this pregnant pause, and the actor playing Salahuddin turns around and says, Jerusalem is everything, and it's nothing. And it struck me as you were speaking that this place of passion, which can draw us and divide us, that for us as people in the world, what does Jerusalem mean? And what do we take from it? And all of you have been frequent visitors. And I'd love to understand more what you take from it. You know, as you go to it, and in some ways it's everything, and yet it's still stone and brick, and in the eyes of God it's just creation, it's just this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you return back from it and you feel compelled, in your case 60 times, to go back again.
Despite the unique welcome that I receive each time.
What is it that you take from Jerusalem, and what continues to bind you to that place, both as people of religion, but also as scholars and those who are deeply concerned about these things? Maybe Rabbi Aaron, if you could maybe comment.
Thank you. I don't know the cultural reference, but the question stands nonetheless. What do I take from Jerusalem each and every time? Well, you've highlighted passion, and the answer lies there. Right? It's a rejuvenation each and every time. But I want to reflect a little bit on a conversation I was actually having with Rabbi Jason before this event started, which will bring me back to that very question. I arrived here with a few hours to spare, and I walked around the beautiful leafy areas of the old campus. And I, heaven forfend, am a Harvard grad, not a Yale grad. But I found myself actually tearing up. And I kept asking myself, what am I reacting to? This is a beautiful place, but what am I reacting to? And I felt full of nostalgia. And I thought, what do you call nostalgia for a place you've actually never spent time in? And then I thought, oh, it's just like Jerusalem. It's just like Jerusalem. It's a place that whether or not you have actually spent any time is full of an idea, and it is full of a passion, and it is full of memories of your people, of the stories they've told themselves over time. And what happens when you go to Jerusalem, and here I'm coming back to your question, is a chance to dip into the well of actual experience, to make space for those memories and those feelings and those passions to flourish over and over again. So what do you call nostalgia for a place you've never been to? You might call it a longing for Zion in some way. And the touchstones, literally, the chances to touch the stones of Jerusalem, or to see, in this case, trees that are reminiscent of other trees, or reminiscent of other memories, or reminiscent of other times in my life, very much call to mind the experience of being in a Jerusalem, and a place that has that power to keep reminding me of my roots, and to keep bringing me back to ever greater levels of connection and passion.
Carolyn, Abdullah, go ahead.
Just briefly, if I may.
Oh, yeah,
We don't have to
yeah.
go in any order. Since my first visit at the age of 19, as I sobered myself from my spiritual drunk phase by two things: the ugliness of the political reality and also harshness of the place, I got into this somewhat bipolar fight between my head and my heart. I never quite understood, still questioning the wisdom of God, why that place? Why you create this incredible universe, yet you pack Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Quran, Torah, and Bible to 50 miles of that place. And whenever I go, I travel quite a bit. AR and I, we were in the Blue Mountains of Toronto area just 2 weeks ago. Like, I go to Vancouver and I say, like, I could have picked this place. I could have picked that place. It is so more. I went to New Zealand and I said, I just would just pick this place. It makes absolutely no rational sense per se. It's not the most beautiful, most charming, easy place to be. But my heart, my heart level, I always pull back immediately. You know, the largest number of journalists in the world, largest number of journalists live in Washington, D.C. And this should not surprise anybody. It's the capital city of the superpower, largest economy, etc. But the second largest number of journalists in the world, registered journalists, live in Jerusalem. And poorest of the poorest countries, like I checked Angola, one of the poorest countries in the world, with all due respect, it's amazing people, they have 2 registered journalists living in Jerusalem. So that means your question's answer cannot be understood through rational, entirely scientific and factual. Why the world's ears, heart, eyes are in one place. And why this place means, for the entire global community, pretty much partnering with God. Partnering with God and squeezing their resources and always feeling the pulse in this place. Some of these questions' answer can only be understood in the spiritual, cosmic, heavenly, even if you are not religious. Only in that realm we can make sense of why Jerusalem.
Do you feel the same way, Dr. Bachos?
Yes and no. I don't know. I mean, listening to Rabbi Aaron speak about Jerusalem, I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, maybe. I mean, it is loud and dirty and all the internecine feuding. It's harsh. It's hard for women, right? So, you know, whenever I hear anyone wax beautifully about, poetically about Jerusalem, my instinct is to be like, oh, no, not quite. And yet, of course, there's something compelling, and I think you really got to it, the nostalgia. And again, as I said about history, my personal history now is in Jerusalem. My heart is in Jerusalem. Look, I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn. You know, you can take the girl out of Brooklyn, but you can't take Brooklyn out of the girl. And that's how I feel about Jerusalem. It's in my bones. And so whether it's beautiful or not, it's irrelevant. It's part of who I am.
All of you have talked about this idea of holiness. And Rabbi Aaron, you talked about the relationship of that to wholeness, that the city of divisions aspires or calls us to fight for wholeness. And one of our guests tonight has offered a really interesting question around the same line, is that, you know, we often talk about Jerusalem as a holy land. And they're wondering, and I'm wondering, you know, where in our traditions does this idea of Holy Land develop? Where do we get this sense from scripture and interpretation and religious history, the sense of holiness and Holy Land?
Does anyone want to say?
Go ahead.
Start again.
Go for it.
Okay.
We'll start with you, Rabbi.
Thank you. I don't need to start each time. We share many of the same stories, so many of those stories testify to the sort of central location being Jerusalem, whether it's the binding of Isaac or the construction ultimately of the temple. Jerusalem is identified as a place that God's eyes are on all the time, and particularly the temple-based culture, which is so central to our own sort of history of holiness, if you can call it that, was centered there. And so both before the temple even was built, there were eyes on Jerusalem, and the Holy Land itself was identified as such. And once those temples were constructed, Jerusalem was literally the center of Jewish life. It was a place, as I mentioned, we just completed a cycle on the Jewish calendar of including Sukkot. There were 3 pilgrimage holidays every single year where Jews, the world over, I suppose, would pilgrimage to Jerusalem to see God. That was the idea. To see God, to experience community. We can wax homiletical in so many ways, but the idea is 3 times a year you had to go there. And so the notion of the centrality of Jerusalem isn't just an abstract idea, it's actually reflected in Jewish ritual, Jewish calendar, and I'll add Jewish liturgy too, which time and again, day in and day out, we reference Jerusalem, we yearn for Jerusalem. And I also just want to say one final word about that. In my remarks, I use the phrase, the Jerusalem rebuilt, Yerushalayim Habnuyah, and it's just worth noting that phrase continues to be used in contemporary Israel. And so the contemporary state of Israel and the sort of imagined Israel are not synonymous. Eretz Yisrael is not the same as Medinat Yisrael. The state of Israel and the land of Israel are not synonymous terms, though they overlap. And so the idea that we can live in one Jerusalem and still dream, literally be in Jerusalem and sing songs and speak of, may we all merit to live in Jerusalem. Just think about that for a moment. You're sitting in Jerusalem and you're wishing to live in Jerusalem, to live in the rebuilt Jerusalem, is to sort of cement that divide between the real and the ideal, and to own the fact that the Jerusalem that we know of today is very far from perfect, and the hope continues to be that we might merit to live inside of that more complete, more whole, and more holy place.
Dr. Bakos, you wanted to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I want. Oh, you're right. So, I mean, it's fascinating how Jerusalem, the role it plays in the Christian imagination when you think of Christianity as spiritualizing and for example, Jesus as the new temple, right? So the idea of something being concrete or earthly is not is secondary, platonic, if you will, to the higher, elevated, heavenly, or spiritualized, and yet there was this quest, holy archaeology, if you will, that was started by Constantine's mother, Helena, who went on pilgrimage to Jerusalem to find the true cross, right? And there you have this tension between the need, the desire to spiritualize, and at the same time point to, attest to in history.
Yeah. Dr. Bakos, that's so interesting because I think in all of our traditions we have this sense
Yes,
of
yes.
barakah, right?
Yeah,
Of finding
yes.
in the archaeology and the built environment and in these objects a kind of a sense of blessing that we try to uncover, maybe through digging it up, maybe through a kind of an experience. And Imam Abdullah, you kind of alluded to this. As a 19-year-old, you go to this place and you're enveloped by this sensibility. And we call it in Islam Baitul Maqdis. So this idea of holiness
holy
is kind of
house
baked
or
into
the holy place by definition.
I mean, how do you approach this term Holy Land through the lens of your tradition?
And there are so many different interpretations, but as you also asked, the city of Jerusalem in Muslim languages called Al-Quds, the holy space. How can a sanctity be endowed as space? How can a place can be sacred if it derives its strength from the foundational text of Islam? There are 17 verses in the Holy Quran. Through many of the biblical and the Quranic stories, starting from Abraham, with Moses later on, and Jesus, where God ordains this place, whether it's conditional, whether not conditional. And throughout the centuries, that holiness played out very, very significantly. That Arz Muqaddas, or the place that's holy and sacred, is within so clearly embedded in our tradition. Whatever we make it sacred, how do we sanctify anything? Whatever mechanism in which anything gets sanctification, Jerusalem over and over in Judaism and Christianity and Islam, in its textual basis, in its canonical basis. I will give only one example. For religious Muslims, Quran only in Arabic, it's the most original form. Any of its translation it's somebody's interpretation. And religiously and halachically, according to our legal tradition, changing any word of Quran in Arabic is a complete no, except when you are reciting the verse about the journey, the trip that Muhammad has done from Mecca to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to the heavens. The verse goes, let me say in Arabic really quickly, Subhanallazi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa, that we brought our faithful servant in a night journey from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. So in Arabic, you have to say the Quran or recite the Quran exactly as is. Otherwise, you are going to violate like a very central concept of Muslim scripture. But only if you are in Jerusalem. You can recite that verse in the Holy Quran by changing the word. Instead of saying ila al-Masjid al-Aqsa, you say Subhanallazi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-Masjid al-Haram ila huna. We traveled our servant from Masjid al-Haram to here. You can change the word. That its sanctity is so undisputable. Like we can discuss how, in what way. But that lands and its place in Muslim imagination is so central that you can even change Quran and add a word or replace a word with something else, but only when you are there. Only when you are. And it's a beautiful, if you are Muslim and haven't been, or Christian Jew, you should always go to Jerusalem. But especially if you are a Muslim and somewhat involved with the tradition, on the anniversary of the Laylatul Isra wa Miraj, on the anniversary of that miraculous heavenly trip, I hope you will be there. It's a whole different cosmic reality.
I know we're up against time, and Rabbi Jason very
Can I ask
generously gave me his watch. I will let you respond in just a moment. But Rabbi Jason, I think your watch is 5 minutes off.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna allow us, if it is okay with you, and with Carleen and with Imam Bajwa, to allow another 5 minutes, because there's a set of questions which I think are difficult, and I want to kind of answer them together. But first,
No,
Dr.
I
Bathos, go
actually
ahead.
wanted to blow things up a bit.
Please,
And ask
in a good way.
Yeah, of course.
When Muslims sort of allow people to blow things up, things
in
get
a
pretty
provocative
controversial.
way.
So,
But you know what?
yeah.
I'll hold off because I want to respect the audience.
No,
And
now
I'm
you got to say
eager-
it, Dr.
No,
Bathos.
no,
You got to
no,
say
no.
it. No, you got to say it. You got to say
Okay,
it.
just very quickly, when Imam Abdullah was speaking, he mentioned foreign. You know, when the Crusades came, the foreign invaders, and I was struck by that because in what if you didn't qualify it, if I didn't know the context, and I heard the foreign invader, I'm thinking, now who's the foreigner here, right? Isn't that part of the problem, right? Who owns Jerusalem? Who's the foreigner? Who's the owner, right? And it's problematic, and it, it's a very sensitive issue, and I like the Crusades are vile, but it's the Crusades are part of a larger problem of ownership and who's in and who's out, who's foreign, who's native. And so I wanted to maybe hear more, but I really do want to hear your questions.
I know that I think that all three of them now veer us into that intersection between spiritual, religious, and political, and the three all have similar tenor. So I'll kind of ask them together, and then feel free to kind of respond as you will. So one of our questioners is interested about your work and efforts in creating the city of peace in Jerusalem, and how are you engaged as individuals, as scholars, in sort of creating the circumstances for that to happen, and the impact that would have on broader conflicts within the so-called Middle East. One questioner quotes Rothschild and says that the solution to the wandering Jew in turn cannot be to create a wandering Arab, and asks, how does the existence and status of today's Jerusalem attest to this statement? And what does it look like from inside Jerusalem when we think about sort of justice and guilt and reconciliation? And then the final is the rather pointed political question, which I'll throw out there because it has been vetted by our three religious leaders. Could you comment on the current move on the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and the implications that's had on politics? But I would go one step further, with all due respect to the person who asked the question. What are the impact of that on the way in which faiths and people exist and live in Jerusalem? So I know those are three similar questions. It's a bit prismatic. Feel free to pick up any one of those that you'd like to pick up as the audience sort of moves nervously in their chairs. I can hear all of you.
And there is a kosher dinner at the end of this conversation. Okay.
And I'm sure we can continue those over
Take
dinner.
the low-hanging fruit.
Please go ahead.
Very low-hanging fruit
go
here,
ahead, Dr.
and
Bathos.
just say that I don't really engage in interfaith dialogue. I mean, yes, of course I do, but that's not my mission. I teach, I educate, I write about connections between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. My last book on my most recent book on the family of Abraham, Jewish, Christian, Muslim interpretations, problematizes the whole idea of Abrahamic. Right? I think that's a term that one has to qualify. And while I think it's very important for us to be ecumenical and see and appreciate the similarities, I think we also have to have intellectual integrity and recognize that they are different traditions. And if you truly want to know the other, you have to know the other. I can't make the other in the image I would like the other to be. Oh yeah, you look like me and that's great, and ignore that you don't look like me, right? No, I want to see you. Imam Omar, I want to see you and you don't look like me. So I'm not going to pretend and ignore that. And I think that's what I try to do in the classroom and in my encounters with the broader public.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm with you, Dr. Bathos. I think the importance of complicating, and I feel all of you have done that incredibly well tonight in terms of complicating this conversation in all kinds of ways, theological, personal, and political. Between Imam Abdullah and Rabbi Aaron, who would like to pick up this strand of conversation first?
Okay. So the easiest one to answer is what part might I play? And I mentioned that I'm involved with an organization called Encounter, which is an organization that's, I think, interestingly not interested in dual narratives, but actually just taking Jewish leadership to hear the stories of Arabs, Muslims in Israel, not only in Jerusalem, but throughout Israel. It's been an interesting strategy. It's diaspora-oriented, actually, because insofar as Jerusalem is our center, diaspora Jews have a lot to say and think about it and influence and on the politics on the ground as well. And so the goal there is to actually take, at this point, a large portion, actually, of contemporary American Jewish leadership on listening tours throughout Israel to hear narratives that they might not have until this point. And it's actually been transformative. Slowly, it's been transforming a lot of different kinds of institutions because they're bringing rabbis as well as educators, as well as foundation heads, as well as activists and people with political influence. All kinds of spheres of influence are being impacted, I think, by these listening tours. So that's been going on for the past couple of years, and I'm deeply involved with that organization. One of the direct impacts has been on my own home base institution, which is called Yeshivat Maharad. It's a rabbinical school for Orthodox women, the first of its kind in the world. And it's changed the way that we educate our rabbis in training to think about Israel and to think about the multiplicity of voices within Israel. So we have a whole curriculum that we have developed in light of that. And then I'm privileged to be a very small part. This is, you have the founder and the primary voice animating the Muslim Leadership Initiative of the Hartman Institute, but I've had a very small part to play, and I'm very, very grateful for that because you've asked what some of my takeaways have been from my time in Jerusalem, and that is one of them. A little bit sadly, I think I have the most direct encounter with Muslim voices when I'm in Jerusalem. I say sadly because I wish I had more outside of Jerusalem as well. But so one of my experiences every year is a chance to actually interface with Muslim leaders who are not living inside of Israel or Palestine, but actually are spending time there, and I have a chance to create some relationships through that. So those are the small parts that I'm playing. I want to just acknowledge the bomb that was thrown into the room about, sorry, I shouldn't say that, but Jerusalem questions, political questions, embassy questions. You asked what the impact is on the populations in Jerusalem, and I actually can't answer. I just don't know. But I will say that it's hard to speak on behalf of the Jewish community. I can't do that. And particularly in this political era, this Trump political era, the Jewish population is heavily polarized, just like the rest of America is heavily polarized.
Except in Israel.
I don't even want to go there right now.
No, but it's important for people to know that except in Israel, where remarkably the most, they're as unified as they can be for their love for Trump. Even if they don't like Bibi, they love Trump. I mean, they have a Mount Har Trump, and they have a mountain named for Trump. Just a point of fact.
So, okay, thank you for that. I'll just say that here we have a moment where the realities for the majority of American Jews and Israeli Jews differ. And you're right that there's more support for Trump in Israel than there is outside of Israel. And so the embassy move was actually very upsetting for a lot of American Jews. And it was very much supported in Israel.
Imam Abdullah, some big questions here.
I'll take the first and the last one very, very quickly. Before I tell you briefly what I do now, let me also briefly mention what Jerusalem has done to me. Jerusalem made me a hater. Jerusalem and all the ugliness around it has, in my developmental and early years, has pumped significant amount of hate to my system. I always introduce myself as a recovering anti-Semite because if hate has been exposed to you early on, it's a lifelong challenge to take that poison out of yourself. I grew up in an incredibly anti-Semitic environment, which is not always representative of all Muslims, but that was my experience. And my initial visit to Israel-Palestine confirmed what I read in the Protocols of Elders of Zion, or Mein Kampf, or in the International Jew. But thankfully, going to madrasa, studying Islam, saved me, my life. And that personal recovery, once I realized I swallowed hate and poison, my attempts to recover, take that poison out of my system, has basically shaped my life as a Muslim, as an American Muslim, Turkish-American Muslim leader. Most of professionally what I do is involved in improving Jewish-Muslim-Christian relations, especially in North America. There are a number of programs, which Aaron kindly mentioned, Muslim Leadership Initiative, but many others as well. That's significantly what I do, which I hope it's a bizarre thing to say your audience, Google my name, but there's a tremendous amount of public information out there. Your last question gives us an opportunity not to think the political, spiritual, and other problems in the Middle East or between Israelis and Palestinians. For no Americans, we should take us off the hook morally, ethically. And to me, a shameful, not only unwise, incredibly despicable act of one-sided, with all due respect and admiration and appreciation of Jewish communities' desire to see Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people, in the way in which it's done is not only adding insult to the injury, but it's giving us an opportunity as Americans about our role or lack of it, our complicated role in this conflict, our involvement. Just look at the opening ceremony picture. It will tell you most of what you need to know. 17 very unique Christian leaders, and our vice president and president, and only a couple of Jewish leaders, very few Jewish American leaders. It presents a very complicated picture. Not only how it's been done without respecting your arbitration role in this conflict, taking one side and doing it haphazardly, and ultimately not even doing it for Israeli Jews, doing it for your own base, a unique Christian community in the United States who's supporting you over and over for bizarre reasons that I don't understand. Like for anyone who has that religious sensibilities, how in what way, with all due respect to their decision, how can you see that those religious values manifesting in this particular political moment is one thing. But I think the way in which the Jerusalem embassy recognition is done, again, with all due respect to Jewish brothers and sisters' desire to see Jerusalem as their capital, there's so much to be learned and understood and appreciated there. But without completely acknowledging and disrespecting and even insulting the Palestinian desire to do the same, or completely ignoring the ongoing Palestinian suffering and doing it to politicize this conflict and this issue here at home, is a moral stain that I hope we will clean at some point, one of many.
Thank you, Imam. Thank you, Dr. Bakos, and thank you, Rabbi Aaron. Before I hand it over to Rabbi Jason, I think to take 30 seconds to reflect on the conversation. I spent 14 and a half years in England and got very used to hearing William Blake's poem sung and recited. And even though, sadly, that poem, interestingly enough, is used by right-wing and hate groups, I think if one reads the poem, one will find a very different sensibility that Blake brought to that writing. And when he spoke about that, in this green and pleasant land, we will create Jerusalem. In some ways, I think it's like a call, to every generation, that how do we create that perfect city, that place, wherever we are. And I want to pay tribute tonight to the honesty of our panelists and the directness with which you answer the questions, and also the fact that you went deep and personal, because I think it's in those personal stories that we find a lot of truth and resonance to our own collective experiences, not only of Jerusalem, but of faith and of sacredness. But I also want to pay tribute, and I think it's important as a member of the Yale community, for me, to pay tribute to the work of our religious leadership here at Yale, not only here at Thomas More. My friend Imam Omar Bajwa at the Muslim Life Program, the Slifka Center, the Chaplain Sharon Kugler, and the incredible team at the chaplain's office. I think those of us who are in New Haven and those of us who are part of the Yale community need to sing the praises of the kind of Blakean Jerusalem Imam Omar, Rabbi Jason, Carlene, and Father Ryan and others are building here at Yale. Really, this is a unique campus. You can go across this country And you will not find a chaplaincy like this or faith communities who are so deeply embedded in one another's lives and who care about each other and disagree and can disagree passionately with each other, but through the lens of mercy. And in this past year, with the attacks on the New Haven Mosque, with the murders that happened in Christchurch of people in a mosque, the attacks on synagogues and on black churches, I have been moved to tears at times to see the great love and affection this community has shown for each other and supporting each other. And I think that says something about tonight's event, but it also says something about our community here at Yale. And I think it's, for those of us who are part of this community, it's almost incumbent upon us in our classrooms and with our fellow students to speak about the incredible work that's going on here. And this model of engagement and interaction should be something that we should not only be proud of, we should continue to strengthen and hopefully export to campuses and communities where that's not the reality. So I pay tribute to the wonderful religious leadership here on Yale campus as well. And I'm going to hand it over to Rabbi Jason. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience.
Thank you to A.R. Malik, and I want to join the chorus of praise and appreciation for our panelists and for St. Thomas More and for Carlene's work. Dinner's ready for us, and I know we're ready for it. As a quick logistical note, the food was all prepared in Slifka's Kosher Kitchen. If you are an undergraduate on the meal plan, please swipe your ID at the iPad as you go in. And I especially want to offer just one framing here. Our hope for the next hour of shared meal is companionship in the deepest and truest sense of that it'll not just be an opportunity for us to share a meal near each other, but actually to share a meal with each other. And these conversations will continue. One of the most striking reflections on the Jewish liturgy is that the blessing on eating bread praises God as the one who brings forth bread from the earth. The minority opinion is that refers to the bread directly in front of us. And the majority opinion is that this is actually imagining the redeemed world in which bread will come forth fully baked from the earth. That each act of eating is an opportunity to imagine a world redeemed and to experience it and to take it in. And just as Carlene opened, the world we live in, we know we don't need any reminders, is not redeemed. And this evening, through these words, has been an opportunity to live in it. And I want to invite you all to bring your voices into creating that world. So for people you know, if you end up sharing the meal with them, you can get to know a new dimension of them through some of the questions and conversations and follow up. And what better way to meet someone than to learn their stories, loves, and pains of Jerusalem. So thank you all, and dinner will be right over here.
Thank you.
Please, la